Okay, today we're working on finishing the truck assembly. I did update the video a little bit, or the assignment a little bit, so you do have to do the sub-assembly drawing. So we'll try to get to that today as well. The neat thing about the drawing is basically the balloons and also the parts list. So these are all the parts we're making. We're going to make the sub-assembly. The only two parts we have left is the hanger, okay, number 5 here, and it number 3, which is the base plate. Okay, so let's start out with the hanger. I want to go ahead and open up part in Inventor for a new part. And this part here, it's not too complicated. It's basically a extruded rectangle with a bunch of holes in it and I think there's only one tap maybe. Right here, one threaded part. So there's a couple of new things we're going to learn though, how to make a plane. So it's definitely helpful. It's a little more complex. Every time we do a part, it gets a little more complex or something different. I'm using Inventor 2019. If you downloaded 2020 or 21 or you're using those versions, everything's still very similar. The tools or the buttons might be in a little bit different spot, but they're all the same information's in there. So just try to find it. All right, first thing we do, start 2D sketch, start 2D sketch. And we're going to basically make a 3 or 1.5 by 2.5 inch rectangle and extrude it out 1 inch. And then we'll just pick a face and start putting holes in it. There is the same hole on the front and back here. So we'll probably put that, just mirror that across and make a mirror plane. So that's something new. Any of the through holes in the front face, we can do it once. So this 1/4 inch hole goes through. This 3 1, that's 5/16, that goes through. So we'll do that same time as we draw the face to avoid having to do extra sketches. Anytime you have a through hole, you can add that to your original sketch if your original sketch has them. So I picked the XY plane. Okay. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do basically is make a center point rectangle. So we use 2-point once in a while as well, like you see in AutoCAD, but for the most part we're going to use 2-point center, which would be very similar to what you'd also see in SolidWorks. So pick 2-point center, and just like a center of a circle almost, grab that origin, make sure it's the green dot, because if you don't get the green dot, it won't have a location and it won't be fully defined later. So the width of this is 1.5, so I just type it. Don't even have to pick it. If it's blue, you just type. Okay. And I screwed up, I hit enter. I should have hit tab, okay? So let's undo and do this the right way. Okay, so I'm going to pick 2-point rectangle one more time. Hopefully you're still in it. I'm going to hit 1.5 and tab and 2.5. That's the height, okay? Now that rectangle, notice it's fully defined. I give it the height, width, and a location. That's what Inventor's always looking for. I'll make this a little bit bigger so we can read it a little bit easier. Okay, so now we're going to put these two holes through, the 1/4 inch and the 0.31. Okay, so pick a circle, and it really doesn't matter where you put it because it's not going to, even if you put it in the right place, Inventor won't get it. You'll still have to tell it is vertically to the origin. So just pick roughly the right spot. It wants a diameter here, so 0.25. Okay, and notice it's green and not fully defined, and not towards the bottom half. Okay, I'm going to put another one. Don't put it on top because it won't dimension right. So put it towards the bottom because you can see it's 1.41 down. And this one is 5/16. You can type in 0.3125 or 5/16, whatever you want. We're trying to use standard fractions like you would in true design work. Okay. All right, now notice we've got them located vertically, but they're not vertically defined. So we got a couple things we got to do here. We got to give them a location from the origin or from somewhere. Since this block is dimensioned from the top, that's where I'm going to do it. So 0.5 from the top and 1.41 from the top. So pick the dimension tool there, and then pick the top line. Try to go from the top line and not a point. Same thing on the circle. Go to the center point. Okay, and just tell it, pick a spot for your dimension and tell it 0.5 and enter. Okay, on the second one, pick a spot for the dimension, or pick the center point and the top, and that one was 1.41. Now I don't expect you to know all these numbers by heart, but I ain't extreme yet, but that's actually a 1.40625. If you want to put 0.41, that's fine as well, instead of trying to memorize all those fractions. I had them beat in my head 20 years ago, so 1.41's fine on that one. All right, so it's still, you can see it's not fully defined. The problem is it doesn't know it's vertically in line with the origin. So we've got to tell it that. And notice our X is X and Y is Y here, so vertical is probably vertical. If you can't see both X and Y, then sometimes the vertical constraint doesn't always work. That's horizontal, that one's vertical. So pick the vertical constraint tool, and then pick the origin, and then pick one of the circles. And you can notice it fully defined when you do that. Now do it again, pick the origin, and you always want to pick the one that is defining the other one first. It wouldn't matter on this one because it's not going to move that origin, but on the other ones it would. And then pick the center of the circle. Okay. Now it's fully defined, and you can see down here that it basically says it can't see it on mine because I'm recording, but down here in the corner it should say fully defined. And notice it's blue. That's what we're going for. Okay. So right click and finish that sketch. Okay, notice we did have to tell the circles to be vertically locked in with that center point, because Inventor, even if you draw them right, it won't make them right. Okay. All right, so I right clicked and I did finish sketch. Now you right click again, and all these things I'm doing are also up here on the ribbon, but it's faster to right click usually. I'm gonna pick extrude, and it doesn't know what to extrude because there's multiple options here with the circles. So just pick on in the rectangle area somewhere. Okay, not by the circles, and it should jump out. All right, I think the thickness of this is 1, which is default, so just hit OK. All right, so we've got that done. So now it's starting to look like this face, or right here. You can see the hole going all the way through and the hole going all the way through. All right, so let's draw this circle next, since that's facing us. We've got a 3/4 inch hole, 0.5 down, and centered. Okay, now we're going to center it on the center of the part, so it always stays centered no matter what, like the design intent would most likely be. And then we're going to tell it a 1/2 inch down. So hover over the right face, and then right click and pick new sketch. Okay, now draw a circle just somewhere on that face. Make sure you don't snap to one of these lines that are showing up, because that's like lines of those other circles. Do not snap to them. That'd be bad, because then it won't move. Especially if it's green, it's going to lock down there, and that would be bad. So just kind of somewhere over here, just draw a circle, okay, and tell it it's 0.75 diameter. Okay, now we're just going to dimension it a 1/2 inch down. Okay, so again, pick on the center point and pick that top face and tell it 0.5. Okay. And then again, use that vertical constraint and the center point of the circle to the midpoint of that top face. Make sure it's green, and that locks it down. Okay, so this thing will always be in the middle now, and 1/2 inch down and 3/4 inch diameter. So it's blue. That's all we can do on this sketch. There's nothing else. So right click, finish 2D sketch, right click, extrude. Now this one we don't want to give a distance. It always goes by distance by default. We want to pick cut. And the other one we want to pick, and it might look a little different if you're doing it on a newer version. You want to pick all, okay, or through. There might be a through button on a newer version. Okay, just hover over it and it'll say through, okay, or all. So make sure that's the cut icon no matter which version you're using. Now hit OK. Alright, you could give it a depth of like 3, but the problem is, what if you make this part wider than 3? Then it's no longer right. Okay, that worked out real well. Let's do the next one. Just got to pick which one we want to do. I guess we'll do this big circle next. Notice this is a side view of it with the hidden lines of the cut. So it is cut through both sides. So what we're going to do is just make one of them, create a center plane, and then it'll cut through both of them. Okay. We'll basically mirror it to the other side. That's the only thing on that side. So let's hover over this front face again, right click, new sketch, okay, and just pick circle. Now I want to try to draw it and see how it's not picking that center point. So we're going to have to project that center point. Sometimes it'll grab it depending on the version, but it didn't. So project that circle. Now make sure you just get the circle. Don't get this whole face. It would still probably work, but it gets complicated and it might not be able to extrude right. So just hover over the circle to get it after you pick project geometry. Okay. Now I've got that circle shown. Now I can pick circle again. Now I've got a center point to use, okay? Because these are always going to be the same place, so I don't want to redimension it and remake it. I want to use what's already there. The size of this one is 1.02. I'm sure that's 1.015625, but let's do 1.02 and just deal with that. And then it's got a depth of 0.38, notice on the dimensions over here. So when we extrude the depth, make that 375 depth. You definitely should learn how to memorize those 375 depths. That's 3/8. So I've just made a circle, 1.02 diameter, enter. It's fully defined. Right click, finish sketch. Right click, extrude. Once again, change it to cut. Okay, pick the circle that needs cut. Change the depth to 0.375 or 3/8. And then hit OK. Let's mirror this to the other side now. So this is the first time we're going to create a work feature. A work feature, all that means is create an axis, a point, a UCS, or a plane. Plane is the one you use the most often because if you want to mirror something or draw something, a sketch, plane is the one you use. Sometimes you need a point so you can create like 3 points and then make a plane from that. That's the definition of a plane. Or an axis, you might need to make an axis through something in 1 point and then use that for a plane. There's lots of different options. Remove your UCS. I haven't had to create very many UCSs. Usually in Inventor you don't need to do that too often. Get into real complex parts you would. Alright, so if you drop down there, there's two options here. One's mid-plane between two planes. That's probably the easiest. We could also pick 3 midpoints on the 3 sides and get our plane in the middle that way. But this one's easier. Mid-plane between 2 planes. So just pick the front face after you pick that. And if you hit the edge and you're careful, you can pick the back face. Okay, you could always spin it and pick it too. And now see, I've got a nice work plane right smack in the middle of this thing. Alright. Once you get that done, on the pattern group, find the mirror icon and pick it. Now you can hover over this hole like that. It's actually a feature. Anything that's 3D is a feature. You could also see it showing up over there in the browser. We could also pick it in the browser. Sometimes it's easier to pick in the browser. Either way is correct. So after you pick everything you want to mirror, which we only have one thing, then you pick mirror plane button there, and then find the plane that we just made. Make sure you get it. It's hard to grab. You got to pick on the edge down here below, so I don't get the wrong one. Okay. So now I've got that, and it's probably showing up already over there. I can look if I spin it, and it is. So I just hit OK. All right. Now if I change the size of that first one or the sketch, this one will automatically always change too. All right. So we're about done with this part. The only thing we got left is this hole on the bottom. So use your view cube over here on the right and hit one of the bottom corners and flip it up so you can see it. Now you can also hold down the shift key and your middle mouse button and spin it. So whatever you're more comfortable doing. It kind of takes a little practice to get that one to work. You can always go home if it gets all messed up and then use that. Okay. Alright, so we're going to draw on that right face. So hover over it till it shows up, right click, new sketch. Sometimes you got to move back and forth over it a little bit. Okay, so we need to put a point in there right in the middle. Alright, so because we're going to use a hole tool to create a tap. So pick a point and just make sure it's in the middle here. And it really doesn't need to be anywhere. Just try not to pick on any of these lines that are showing up all over the place. At least don't make sure they're not green, because then it won't move. So I'm just going to put a point right there, which is totally the wrong spot, but that way I can lock it down. And now I'm going to pick horizontal. And horizontal on this, you can see my X going up, so it's probably going to be up and down. Yeah, it is. And not horizontal is now vertical because of the way the screen's been switched. So I'm going to pick on this center point. And then I'm going to pick on this midpoint right here, okay? And that brings it to there, okay? Now I probably should have picked on the midpoint first, but since it's not going to move that midpoint because it's fully defined, it doesn't really matter. Now I'm going to pick on the other one, which is vertical, and vertical now is actually horizontal because the Y is in the other direction. And I'm going to pick on the midpoint here of the part of that face, and then the center point. Now notice it turned blue and it fully, or black, and it fully locked it down. Okay, so that one's done. Finish sketch. Alright, the reason we did all that work on that point was, for one thing, hole tool wants a point to create it. That's why we created it on there. The other reason is we centered it up, so no matter how many times I change this part size, that thing's always going to stay in the middle. Okay, so now we go to hole tool, which looks like a hole in something. All right, and it looks a little bit different depending on the version. They keep updating this thing, and every version seems to be more complicated. It used to be real easy. Okay, so there's a couple things here. It found it right away because I have a point, which is awesome. And it says it's 3/8 by 16. Okay, now mine picked that because I did a part the other day like that. So if yours doesn't have a size 0.375, make it 0.375, okay? It's probably on hole if you haven't done one in a while. So make sure it's actually on tapped hole and not the tapered tap, just regular tapped hole, okay? Now the depth of it down here is very critical because notice this hole can't get into this place where our rubber bushing is going to end up going. Because if it goes into there, of course, it'll ruin the rubber bushing real fast on our suspension. So it's got a depth of 1/2 inch. Right here it tells us 3/16 tap, 1/2 inch deep. Okay, so change this depth to 0.5. Okay, and then you're not done yet because it's trying to drill a hole for the tap. It's trying to drill a hole for the tap 1 inch deep. We're going to have to use a bottom tap on this, which means it's tapped all the way down, which is a little bit of a pain, but it's kind of has to be done for this one. 0.5, okay, and then we hit OK. I think we got everything. Yeah, make sure it's on distance on termination, not through. Okay, hit OK. All right. Okay, so that one's done. Okay, so this part's done. I'm not going to go through making the drawing on this. I think you're all capable of it. Make sure you just pick the two sides when you're doing these dimensions on the drawing. You can use if you have your template made, use that. If not, use the default template. See here, it's only 3 inches tall, so A size would be right. So if you're a little confused on that, just watch the video on the previous parts, but it's an A size drawing. Those dimensions are easy. These are just circle dimensions. Double click on the dimension or while you're creating it, add the text. The only one that's a little tricky is this one here. You can use a hole tool dimension, or it's the hole tool dimension to create this, so you don't have to type all this stuff in, which that's the preferred way to do it. You don't want to type all that stuff in. Same thing with this one. Use a hole tool dimension. Don't type all this 3/8-16 UNC. If you use a hole tool dimension, it'll generate every bit of that stuff. Okay, that's really the only trick to this one. For the material, we never did make the material on this, did we? Okay, go ahead and create the material. The top left, you'll see generic. Drop the generic down, and this is aluminum 6061, which is cheapest and most common aluminum on the planet. So we changed that. You also have to find the weight. That helps me check it. You can add the weight to your title bar. I think that it might show up if you want to, and you could also add a material in there if you want to when you're creating your title block for your template. I don't have that listed, but if you wanted to do that, you could. It'll save you time on your drawings. All right, to find the weight, remember you go to File. I'm a little slow here, sorry. Properties. Okay, and it only works inside the part. There's no weight in the drawing, so make sure you find it out while you're in the part. Physical, update, and then it tells you the weight. Okay, if you didn't come up with 0.234, you probably forgot to change material, or you made a hole wrong or something. Okay. All right, make sure you save your work. Make sure you save it to some platform that's going to stay there. If you're using our school's networks, remember it won't stay on your C drive, so upload it to a locker or something, or a thumb drive or U drive or somewhere safe. All right, I'm going to save mine. I'm going to use my personal PC, so new file, it should save hopefully. What's this thing called, the hanger again? Yep, hanger. Use all caps typically. Okay. And eventually, after you get all these parts done and we get into the sub-assembly, you're going to have to make sure, I'll show you how to zip all the files together, because they have to stay in the same place. If they don't, when you bring the files down one at a time, it could be a problem. So make sure you always keep the files in the same folder. If you don't, it could be a problem. All right, let's jump into this next one. It's kind of tricky too. So the next part is the base plate. This is probably the hardest one. Like I said, they kind of get more difficult as we go. Okay, there's a lot of ways to do this thing. It's got a hole coming through this, straight down through here. Okay, and it comes out at a 45. I think that bolts this hanger onto it with so that's threaded. That's what bolts are on. There's rubber bushing in both these, and this is what acts like the when you see the sub-assembly. This lets you turn since it's at a 45, and the rubber bushing is in there when you lean to one side of the board. It's got another hole here coming straight down through this one. These two parts are 90 degrees apart. Notice the drawing has a section view in it. It's got 4 holes in the top there. So there's a couple ways to do this. I think I do it a different way every time I draw it. Today we're going to basically try to follow this pattern like this all the way through and make it 2 inches extrusion out of that. Okay, so that's a little tricky of a sketch, but got to jump into it sometime. So if you're careful when you're drawing this, you can add some of them dimensions, and then you can add all the other ones with the dimension tool later, and then extrude it 2 inches deep. Okay, but like I said, there's a lot of ways to do it. I'm just trying to come up with the most efficient. The other is, and then after you get that done, we'll go to the top face, and we'll make 2 rectangles for this size and cut them through. Okay. And then we'll make 4 holes on there and cut them through, and then another hole, cut it through, another hole, cut it through, and done. Okay, so let's do it. Alright, so I'm going to close this one out. And now you do need to create a drawing for this one, so if you're doing this on your own, do the drawing first, because it'll automatically grab this part, which makes it a little bit easier for you. Okay. Alright, new part again. I'm going to end this video and start a new one so we don't have such huge videos.